once you embrace that lost part of you, then you can move forwards. Then you're on the path of self-integration and you're making yourself whole.
The roadmap back to you. Reshape your world from the inside out and find peace of mind. So welcome to the first episode in the Roadmap Back to You podcast. And today I'm having a conversation with somebody's journey that truly inspires me, Anand Subhuti. The intention of this podcast is to interview people and experts who are on the path of self-awareness, self-discovery, and to gain insights that they have used to reshape their own worlds from the inside out and their quest to find peace of mind. We will be diving deep into their frameworks, the mindset, and looking for key words of wisdom and what really has shaped their own inner journey. So today I'm having a conversation with Anand Subhuti, who is the author of 6 books, the latest book being Wild Wild Guru, where he shares about his journey and encounters with the mystic Guru Osho. He worked as a political journalist in the early 1970s. He is a meditator, a friend, and a sannyasin. And he lives in Denmark in a meditation center called Osho Risk, which I've also visited. So welcome, Subhuti.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm in the midst of reading your book and your journey. And maybe for our listeners, you could start off with an overview of your life journey so we get a sense of your path and who you are.
Yeah, I think you could say that up to about somewhere around the mid-20s, I was basically mainstream, on track, believing, everything I've been told at school and by society, that it's important to have a good career and good income and maybe then get married, settle down, wife and kids. It was all going pretty much in that direction, but then I kind of derailed myself, and it's always a mystery why these things happen. But I suddenly realized over a period of a few years, that my main interest was not in the glittering prizes offered by society, but in self-inquiry, meditation, spiritual journey. And that was a big shift. And it happened around, I don't know, the age 28, 29. Everything changed. And then, I gave up my job in the Houses of Parliament, stopped being a journalist, and went to India and met Osho.
And who would you say that Osho was?
He was the answer to a question. I've been reading all these books about Buddha and Sufi. Sufi stories were very popular at that time, and Zen stories, and all about these enlightened mystics. And then also in California, there was Carlos Castaneda talking about the teachings of Don Juan and all these kind of. And I had met a few spiritual teachers, but I thought, I had the idea there is a state called enlightenment, which is, in my understanding, a completion of the quest for fulfillment, spiritual awakening. Although I'd met some very interesting people, I had not met somebody I thought was fully enlightened, fully spiritually awakened. And when I met Osho, he was the answer to that question. He was, as far as I could tell, the real thing. He had, in that sense, found himself on that deepest level. People like Gautam Buddha and Jesus Christ and Lao Tzu had done. And then the question shifted. The question then was, can I learn from this person to somehow approach the same state?
Yeah. And, you mentioned that when you first heard his voice, you heard a man that was completely at ease with himself. And you mentioned that I would give anything to have that kind of peace in my life. Would you like to share a little bit about this longing for peace at that time as a journalist?
Yeah, I think I was on the verge of giving up being a journalist at that point. But certainly there was a lot of stress and a lot of tension in my life, just regular old, daily life, daily tension. And I had been meditating or exploring meditation. And afterwards there was a cup of tea and someone put on this audio tape by Osho. And just the quality of his voice at that time, I think everybody has had those moments in their life when they really feel just relaxed and content in themselves. after you've won a football game, or you've been working on a project for 6 months and or you've been writing a book for a year and you finally put it away and it's finished. And then briefly, I would say, in normal life, you get this feeling that now I can just relax. I'm sure people do, people who go for long walks or anything really, any kind of challenge which you successfully overcome, you come to this place. And I think that's important for everybody. And what meditation offers is the possibility of living 24 hours in that state of self-acceptance, self-relaxation, fulfillment.
Wow. And do you feel that your journey to look for this peace was fulfilled in going to India? Like, how did that then manifest in your life and what did you discover?
Okay, well, the first thing I discovered was pretty much the exact opposite of what I'd been looking for. I mean, Osho developed, this is one of the things I greatly appreciate about him. He developed some active meditations and he said, look, it's no good for Westerners are so speedy, so uptight, so tense, so driven, so interested in quick results. No good sitting down, under a coconut palm and looking at your navel, and hoping to find some peace. It'll be very superficial, he said. So he developed these meditations where you actually, and there's one particular meditation, which I'm sure you know, called dynamic meditation, where you have 10 minutes fast breathing and then you basically scream and shout and let it all out. And that is a deliberate attempt to release some of the built up pressure inside, some of the stress, some of the tension that we normally carry. We have to bite back so much of our expression. Someone's being nasty to us, but we have to smile and say yes because they're the boss, or any kind of situation where we're not being true to ourselves, or where we want to, just shout or just say, I hate you or whatever. And all of that energy is bottled up inside because we are civilized people. I'll put that in inverted commas, civilized. And so what Osho was saying is, look, let this stuff out. Take the lid off the pressure cooker. Let this stuff out, scream it, shout it, beat a pillow, pretend it's your father or whatever, bang it away, whatever, and get it out. And then there's a chance that you will be able to sit down and experience what real silence and real relaxation and real meditation are. So I very much appreciated that approach because here was somebody who really understood the paradox of people who are locked into a modern lifestyle and yet they still want to meditate. And I think dynamic meditation is a stroke of genius.
Yeah, for me as well. I think when I started with Osho meditations, it was a real shift because I had done Vipassanas, before, and that was all very kind of controlled. And I felt like I had lots of emotions that were not dealt with, that I felt Osho was helping me to release and deal with. So I think it's very needed, this emotional kind of release, these meditations, especially today when there's so much suppression.
Yeah, I mean, this word control, I think it's that you used, I think it's very relevant because yes, Vipassana is controlled, and also yoga. I mean, I'm totally in favor of yoga. I think it's a great discipline. And it's certainly been one of the biggest avenues for people to approach Eastern ideas. But again, it's control. Yoga is the path of control. And as you say, we're sitting on a lot of pressure inside. Yeah. And that's what I love about dynamic meditation. You have an extraordinary opportunity to just vent, express, release. It's such a wonderful permission to actually take the lid off. And basically, it's not meant, I mean, some people are shocked when they first do dynamic meditation because of this, but it can be very enjoyable to be angry and not difficult at all. I mean, it's all in there. I mean, just have to. And one of the things he said, which I really like, was he said, if you can't connect with your anger, because some people in the beginning have this difficulty, just pretend to be angry, fake it till you make it. And it's amazing, you pretend to be angry and suddenly, suddenly it's authentic and it doesn't take much. And of course, it's not just anger that we have inside. Tears, madness, laughter, everything, it's just a question of allowing everything to come up and then sit silently or stand. You're immediately at a much deeper level than you would be if you had just sat down and tried to close your eyes.
That's really powerful. Would you recommend, like, if someone's going through some kind of situation which is causing them anger or some very strong emotional disturbance, like, what would you recommend for this person? Is there a technique that you suggest, or is it dynamic? Or I know that gibberish can also be powerful. What would you recommend?
I think it's difficult to generalize, because what is going to happen, let's say I'm, going through a divorce and I'm angry with my wife because she wants to take everything from me. I've never been married, I have, but I haven't been in that particular situation. I'm just being hypothetical. So, there's a lot of anger there and bitterness and rage. Now, the thing is, if you start doing dynamic, there's going to be a period, at least the first few times, when you're going to be even more raw and sensitive and vulnerable than you were before you started. It's not like, this is one of the problems they had. There was a director of prisons in India, or in Delhi, and there's a very brutal and tough jail in Delhi called Tihar. And she had the idea, this new director, that if all the prisoners did dynamic, you'd get rid of all their bad stuff. But they had to stop it because the prisoners got so, they loved it, but it made them even more reactive because they were more sensitive, they were more open, they were less controlled. So it's not the case, okay, I'm going through a divorce, I'm angry with my wife, I better do dynamic meditation. Yes, it could be helpful, but I think it might be better to go away and do a course, take a break, take a complete break. And then, because there's a period with dynamic that you have to somehow get used to it. Get used to this idea of being in contact with your feelings directly, because that takes some meditative awareness to be able to do that. I think it's a challenge for everybody to find what works for them in that moment in their lives. And it would be very difficult for me to say, oh, just do this, everybody, and everybody will feel better. You understand?
Yeah.
But I would say that any kind of emotional discomfort is an incentive to look at yourself and to explore the world of meditation and growth.
Yeah, something that you share about in your political career as a journalist is witnessing a system that invites, as you call it, the walking wounded to run for office, using the power given by others to cover up their own sense of inferiority. And something that I found quite profound in reading and moving into your book was this journey that you've had to be wishing to be seen as somebody in the eyes of society, and this kind of need for recognition, which I can relate to as well, is my journey in like being nobody. And I really loved hearing about Subhuti, your name, which was given by Osho. And would you like to share a little bit about what your name means and your journey into from being somebody to being nobody, and what that looks like?
Yeah. Westminster was a good introduction because there were two things going on. One was I was very young when I became a political correspondent, and my career, in a sense, was on track. And I wanted to end up, political editor of The Guardian or political editor of The Times or something. That ambition was there. And of course, I was looking at the politicians and how they behave. And as you say, I noticed that it plays out in many different ways, but basically politicians want to be powerful. There's a hunger for power because, that makes them feel how they don't feel in ordinary life, which is like insignificant or nobody, as you might say. When I went to Osho, this was very interesting because he was a man who I could see just by being who he was and talking to him face to face, that he had that power inside himself. He didn't need to get it from the outside. And that was very attractive because I think that we should all be able to do that. We should all be connected with ourselves in such a deep and authentic way that we don't need the approval of others. And that's nice. I'm not saying we should avoid it. I just did this wonderful little, just participating in this wonderful little video that we did of Osho risk dance routine to Jerusalem, this South African song which is going around the world. And of course, I wanted to be seen in the video and do my steps and do it right and look good, and that's fine. I'm not saying we shouldn't have our little moment on the stage. But we shouldn't depend on it. I mean, for our self-worth, for our self-esteem. That was very interesting then that somehow Osho saw that in me because he gave me this name, Subhuti. And he told me it was Buddha's chief disciple. And he made him sound very important. But when I read the book the next day, he wasn't important at all in that way. I mean, there were many, many people who came to Gautam Buddha. This is about, 2,500 years ago? Very important people who were gurus in their own right, who came basically to challenge Gautam Buddha, and then, of course, saw what a magnificent being he was and became his disciple. Many, many important people around Buddha, but Subhuti was a nobody. And through relaxing into his nobodiness, he found his true power, his authentic self. So that was a good lesson. Osho gave me the name Subhuti. Before that, I was just Peter.
Wow, that's really powerful. And do you think that a lot of, we'll go back to the people in this kind of political system, you say walking wounded, covering up their sense of inferiority. Do you think that a lot of this comes from wounds from our inner child that needs to be seen or recognized?
It's a very strange business growing up because it seems that no matter how well-intentioned our parents are, we are always taught to focus for approval on the outside. Maybe it's that survival mechanism of the baby that, learns to love the mother because the mother is the source of nourishment and the baby is helpless. But we are basically, everybody, in different degrees, we are taught to seek approval from outside, first from our parents and then from society, from our teachers, how many likes you get from your friends on Facebook. It's like we're just sucked out of ourselves into this dependence on approval from outside. And politicians have that even more than most people, I think, which is why they actually have to go and look for power and try. Of course, every politician wants to be the prime minister, basically, and wants to be in Downing Street, like Boris Johnson. One of the famous quotes when he was in Eton was, "I want to rule the world."
That's interesting. In this journey of really finding the inner power, and inner power, inner peace, really moving from inside out. Do you think that meditation is the way in? How would someone access the inner power, or what has been a key tool or insight that you've used to tap into this inner power?
I think there's 3 different approaches. One is meditation, because meditation takes you in and gives you an experience of your consciousness beyond your personality. And that's important. And then there's all kinds of different personal growth processes that people can do, which I have benefited tremendously from some of these processes, such as, exploring your inner man, inner woman, meaning your feminine qualities and your masculine qualities, both of which need to be expressed or embraced. Found that very important. Then there's obviously primal therapy, going back to your early childhood and looking at some of those wounds that, as I say, our parents mostly were acting from the best of intentions. And my parents were quite hurt when I even suggested that there were some issues to look at. So, best not to share everything with your parents. Yeah, so primal therapy, and then there's family constellation developed by Bert Hellinger in Germany. That's a brilliant system for resolving family network issues. And then there's the Enneagram, which I teach, which is very deep look at your personality structure and how it's made up. So there's many, many tools that one can use. And I think it's up to each person to see which of those tools will benefit them the most at that particular time. And lifestyle. Lifestyle is important because if you're leading a frantic, high-pressure lifestyle, in the mainstream, there's very little opportunity for self-reflection and self-development. I think in almost everybody's life, there has to come a point where you basically have to ease up on the accelerator and say, look, I'm not going to be political editor of the Times. Maybe I'll just settle for political correspondent for the Birmingham Post, which I was until that newspaper folded, and learn what I need to learn from this situation, which was very glamorous in a way, writing about national problems and national crises. But then after about 2 years, I was like, okay, what else is new? And then, of course, looking at the older journalists, they were not a pretty sight. They were bitter, cynical. Some of them were alcoholics. Journalism is not a nice profession at that level anyway.
Okay, this is interesting. And what advice do you have? Because I remember one of the conversations we had at Risk, which I found quite fascinating when I was doing primal work and inner child work, was I had this realization that I kind of got stuck at the age of 7 and I stopped growing, I stopped growing up. One of the insights that I've had is there's a difference between growing old and growing up. What advice do you have around that, or in terms of, moving from being wounded children, looking for this sense of approval on the external, to really becoming adults?
I remember that conversation about being stuck at the age of 7, but that is actually the very first step that you need to take. That's quite an insight, actually. And then suddenly you realize that there's some unfinished business left back there when you were 7. It's like, hey, and that's affecting my life. That part of me was not allowed to mature, was not allowed to grow naturally. So maybe that insight is very important. And then once you've had that realization, you can then start to look, where do I go to take care of this? Maybe to primal, maybe to individual sessions, maybe to some other form of therapy, maybe to family constellation. You start exploring and reconnecting with that 7-year-old, finding out, why did she get stuck? Well, how does she feel about it? You can visualize in your imagination, and you can connect with your feelings to that child, and you can have a conversation with her, with a good therapist guiding you. You can have a conversation, and she can let you know what happened, what she wants. And from there, once you embrace that lost part of you, then you can move forwards. Then you're on the path of self-integration, and you're making yourself whole.
And one of the things that I love about Osho and my few years of experience with Osho is this. I felt like when I entered this world of Osho, it was bringing me a lot of joy, because he focuses a lot on celebration and freedom and joy. And I've never seen that in another spiritual path before. Prior to discovering this, I found a lot of them was all about austerity. Whereas when I touched Osho's work, it was this permission to celebrate life. And in your journey of being a sannyasin, what do you think taking sannyas was for you? And how do you feel that linking to celebrating life?
Yeah, this is interesting because, Osho has never been a respectable teacher. People tend to avoid talking about him. They were a little bit nervous talking about Osho because he really had a good time himself and encouraged all of us to enjoy life to the maximum. And this was one of his contributions, I think, which is slowly being absorbed in the whole idea of a spirituality, is you don't sacrifice your material world, your life in the world, for the inner journey.
Yeah. And, Osho is no longer, well, this is debatable, but he's no longer here in his physical body.
Absolutely. That's not debatable. That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a fact. But how do you think his teachings or his meditations are still relevant for today's world and for someone who might be a beginner in this? Because I think today there's so much uncertainty in the world, and people are dealing with so much anxiety and fear and uncertainty about the times that we're living. So how do you feel that we can make what he brought relevant to today?
I think the first thing to understand is everybody has to trust their own experience. I would encourage people to pretty much try everything that comes along, especially in the beginning. If they want to go and see Muji, if they want to, do a retreat in a Zen monastery, do Vipassana, travel around India, talking to gurus, Sadhguru, for example. Try everything. and see what works for you. I think what's going to last from Osho is definitely his active meditations. I don't see another meditation method in the world which is as powerful as dynamic meditation. It's just brilliant. If you do it properly, you're going to experience meditation. And I think his vision of living totally, living fully, both your spiritual life and your material life, I think that's a gift that you don't need to choose one or the other.
That's relieving to know.
Yeah, me too.
And inside the Path of the Sage journey, which we have at our Kanagara community, you had recently led a series of 3 workshops for us, on the Enneagram, which was really brilliant. Can you share a little bit about the Enneagram and the journey that our participants took into discovering their Enneagram number or personality type?
Yeah, the Enneagram is an interesting tool because the strange thing about human beings is we all think that we're fully awake. When we make decisions about life, we are fully conscious of what we're doing. I was convinced that who I was who I thought I was at that time, which was, I think, I was about 29, I think, at the time, when I met the Enneagram. And I was doing a general course in meditation in London, and part of it was the Enneagram. And it was just an introduction in London, and I didn't think much about it. And then we went to New York and we did an advanced training in New York City. And it was all about personality types. I thought I was a particular type, and they said, no, you're not that type. You're this type, which happened to be a number 7 in the terminology of the Enneagram. And when they started to describe the characteristics of the 7 and the behavior patterns of a 7, my jaw dropped down to my knees. I was just like, oh my God, this is so true of me. And this is a pattern for all these types. So that basically makes me a robot. If my behavior can be predicted as a pattern because of life choices I made when I was a child, that's where it all comes from, of course, the strategies we choose to manipulate the parents. And that was such a shock in a way. It's like, I don't know. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I was in control of my life, of myself, at least, maybe not my life. And it's not true. There's stuff inside me which is controlling me that I don't even know about. I'm being moved. I'm being manipulated by an unconscious mechanism inside my mind. And that was mind-blowing, literally. And then fortunately, I did do some work with that and I familiarized myself with the Enneagram work, which I'm grateful for. But then it was about, 2 years later, I met Osho. And Osho gave the real foundation to the whole thing. He said, yes, basically, you have all these mind structures, these behavior patterns of the mind. And what I'm interested in doing is giving you an experience of your consciousness beyond the mind. So that was the missing piece in the Enneagram, really, because it's like, yes, you can become more aware of the mind and how it works and how it controls you and how it pushes your thinking in certain directions. And that's just the mind. Your consciousness is much, much bigger than the mind and has the capacity to stand back from the mind and watch it. Watch the thinking processes, watch the emotions, watch the moods. And so that was the complete teaching for me. The Enneagram and meditation made perfect sense together. That's why I started teaching it.
Wow. So I want to go beyond the mind. How do I do it?
Dynamic meditation.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So do you feel like you've experienced going beyond the mind?
Yes, in glimpses, yes, not as a permanent state. And I, most of the time, can, if I'm not too busy or too caught up in things, I can watch what's going on in the mind, even though I'm identified with it. I'm not totally free of it, but I have much, much more awareness of what's going on inside me and when I'm motivated and why. And I would just like to say this about dynamic. I know everybody has their favorite meditations. Sufi whirling or, chanting mantras or doing yoga. I highly recommend dynamic meditation because not only for its own sake, but it will deepen your other favorite meditations. You can do dynamic for like 21 days and then go back to chanting mantras, and it will be a totally different experience. Or go back to doing yoga, and it will be a much deeper experience. So I wouldn't say, you've got to do dynamic and you shouldn't do anything else. That's not the game at all. I think everybody has to, make their own, trust their own experience.
Yeah. And how many years have you been meditating?
Too many. I should be enlightened by now.
Yeah, I think you might be. I don't know.
Yeah, just a few corners to brush up.
Yeah. So, it's been really, really interesting having this conversation. I wanted to ask you one kind of final question, which I think a lot of people have in their mind, is people are often looking for the purpose of their life. Like, what's the purpose of my life? What would you say is the purpose of life or the purpose of your life?
The purpose of life is not to look for the purpose of life. I see it, the opportunity that life presents us is to live each moment, because the future hasn't, we may have goals. We want to be the prime minister. We want to be the chief executive, the chairman of the board. We want to be a millionaire. We want to be a pop star. We want to, have 1 million likes on Facebook, whatever, But all you have is this present moment. That's all there is. And if you sacrifice this moment because you're so busy thinking about what you're going to do in a year's time, you're not living your life. You're wasting your life. Even if you make it, you've lost the time in between. So this is really what I got from Osho, which is to really squeeze the juice out of each moment that we live. It's true a little bit. Right now I'm thinking I'm going to go and have a nice cup of tea, but basically, I'm very much enjoying being here in this present moment with you. And I would strongly suggest to whoever is now watching this recording or listening to this recording that just take a moment in this, just to be here now, to live this present moment, because that's all we've got. And if you can really get the knack of living the present, you don't think about the purpose of life, because that is giving you what you think you might get if you reach some other goal.
Okay, so that I think is a great way to complete our conversation. And I personally gained a lot of value from this chat and gained some key insights from having a conversation. I also really enjoyed it. So I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to being here and also planning our next Enneagram workshop, maybe. So if you're listening, I invite you to just watch out for what we have planned. And if the opportunity arises, it would be great to have Subhuti come and be part of our next workshops as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks. And enjoy your cup of tea.
And thank you for inviting me.
Hello, friend. Thank you for listening. If this podcast has sparked a flame in you, I encourage you to take the first step and download our free Ikigai journal or join the community at kanagarajourneys.com. Also, I invite you to share this podcast with a friend if you feel it can benefit them. Using the wisdom of the Tao, the Enneagram, meditation techniques, and so much more, I share the tools that have made a profound impact on my own journey and invite experts and high performers to share their secrets. I wish for you love, compassion, and peace, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode.